Welcome everybody. This is the Cobb Artist in Residence program, and this week we're super excited to have Mr. Brian Balmages, where do you live, Brian? I don't even know.
Baltimore.
Baltimore, great, which is a beautiful city if you've never been. We're super excited to have him here. As always, this is going to be run through YouTube as well, so if you get logged off or if you want to watch this in the future, you can go to the Sprayberry Orchestra TV YouTube account and you'll be able to watch it afterwards. So Brian, thank you for being here. Why don't you go ahead and lead us off and tell us generally who you are, how you got where you were, and then we'll launch into some questions.
Sure. Well, I'll give you the brief overview, and I'll be very honest with you guys. I don't want to talk at you for an hour, right? I want this to be collaborative. I want this to be engaging. And so as we're going through this, if you have questions, please ask them, right? The thing that stinks about the pandemic is that we are all, at home. The thing that's great about the pandemic is that we get more time together than we might have gotten all year long. And that time is right now. So take advantage of it and ask me questions. I'm thrilled to answer those. I'll give you the very short version of me. I am a trumpet player. And so I grew up playing in school bands. My high school orchestra was awful. And I use the word awful in a very legitimate way. We were terrible. And so we played like Finlandia every year, and that's all we really could do. And it was terrible. And we did that. And that was my experience playing in an orchestra. And I just never really was into it. Who could blame me, right? I would always make all-state band, never all-state orchestra. And it was my first time ever playing. I made the All-Eastern Orchestra. And that is a group made of all-state players from Maryland all the way through Maine. And we played the Rachmaninoff Symphonic Dances, Opus 45. And that rocked my world. At that moment, I kind of realized, wow, orchestras are like cool. Like they're good, right? And really motivated me a lot. And so that began my love for playing in orchestras. I played in orchestras all through college. When I finished college, I auditioned and won a job in the Miami Symphony Orchestra, a second trumpet in that group. And I played with them for several years. I also played at Disney in one of their college programs, the Disney Grammy College Orchestra. And I played out in Los Angeles in the Henry Mancini Institute when it was out there. We played at the UCLA Royce Hall, played with some incredible players over my time there between that and Disney, just monster players. Played Marvin Hamlisch, the guy who wrote Chorus Line. He conducted us. We played with the directors will know people like Matt Kattengoob, Tony Tennille, Jim Nabors, just a who's who, John Pizzarelli. And so I got to play a lot with these people. Now here's the one thing that all of you are saying, well, that's all great, but we don't know you as a trumpet player. We know you as a composer, conductor. So what's that all about, right? And so here's what I'll lead you off with. I am a full-time composer and a conductor. I do not have a composition degree. I've never studied composition formally. I do not have a conducting degree. I never studied that. I studied conducting, but I never took a degree in it. I do not have an education degree, which is what I do, obviously, when I'm doing honor bands and honored orchestras. And what's the other degree I don't have? A performance degree. I don't have that either. So what do I have a degree in? I have a degree in life. No. My degree was music industry. And so when I was in high school, I was writing music, not down, but just at the piano and playing and having fun. And then I was in my band and I did an arrangement of Raiders of the Lost Ark for them and didn't know how to write for percussion. So I told the percussionist to just make something up. Do not ever do that, ever. That's a bad idea. And I learned, right? And so then when I went through college, I was just writing for all the groups that I played in. And at the same time, learning how to record everything that I was writing. I wanted to learn how to record so that when I finished college, I wanted to have like a demo reel of my music. And that's kind of how I got started. The whole performance thing, right? I decided very early on that I didn't want a performance degree. And for me, and this is an individual thing, and this is not to influence you, but for me, the performance degree did not really make me better, I didn't think. but it locked me in. In other words, I felt like if I graduated with a performance degree, the only thing that I was really able to do at that point was then to go get another degree, because I can't go teach with a performance degree. I couldn't, there was a lot of things that I couldn't do. But even though I was a music industry major and other people were performance majors, I decided, you know what? I don't care that I'm not a performance major. I'm going to practice more than them, and I'm just going to beat them in the audition. And there was never an audition that I took that somebody said, whoa, 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 before you start, do you have a performance degree? Nobody ever asked me that. Nobody cared. They wanted to hear me play. And so I played. And so I wound up with this massive background. Now, it was not a fallback. That is such a big mistake we make when we talk about, well, you wanted to play and you wanted to write, but you got this, you fell back on the music industry degree. Oh, no, 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 not at all. That was not a fallback degree. That was a plan, because I wanted to record, right? I wanted to learn how to record my music. I wanted to learn how to be a songwriter. That was part of my degree. I wanted to learn how to write in all different kinds of styles. I wanted to learn how to set music to film. Like, I wanted to learn all that stuff. And this degree enabled me to do that. And at the same time, I was able to spend as much time with my instrument as I wanted to. So when I graduated from undergrad, I was able to do a million different things, right? I wasn't just one trick pony. And I think the college graduation, usually you need, a lot of you probably know this, especially those of you that are starting to look at college, you probably need like 120 credits or so to graduate with your undergrad degree. I graduated with 204. As an undergrad. I was 3 credits short of a doctorate. The head of the School of Music told me, but she could only give me an undergrad degree. And I was like, that's cool. That's fine. Nobody will ever say that I did not maximize my time. So what did I take with all those extra credits? Public speaking. Oh, hey, look what I'm doing right now, right? I took public speaking. I took counterpoint, right? Who in their right mind would take counterpoint? Who would do that to themselves? Well, I did. And counterpoint finds its way into my music all the time. I did take extra semesters of conducting because I wanted to learn more about the craft of conducting. I did not want to be the composer who gets onto the podium that everybody says, well, they're conducting because they're a composer, but they're not very good. I wanted to be able to go onto the podium and people say, I want them to conduct even if they're not conducting their own music. That was my thing. I didn't want to hide behind my own music. I wanted to just be a conductor. All right. And so I did all of those things. And when I left, I felt like that was able to then open the door for me for a huge variety of things. And I went down to Miami. I got a degree there in media writing and production. Again, wanting to learn how to do all this stuff. I was writing in jazz. I wrote rock music. I wrote country music. I wrote for jazz combo. I wrote for full-on jazz ensemble. I actually wrote like psychedelic heavy metal crazy stuff to the point where one of my professors actually like asked me if I was okay or going through a rough patch, right? But now, is that something I still write now? No, not really. But some of you probably have played my piece Lyric Metal. And if you've played Lyric Metal, which is a piece that is very much inspired by Apocalyptica, that heavy metal finished cello quartet, I was able to draw on my own experiences writing for rock groups and writing for heavy. I was able to draw from that, right? And so all of these things kind of have come together and created who I am. And so I feel like I have a very specific identity now, but I feel like that identity merged from me not closing myself off to one career path, but being open to the possibility of various concepts in music. You know, there are so many things we can do in music. You think about it. A lot of times people are like, well, I want to be a performer. And so especially in the string world, right, we all want to make it into an orchestra or we all want to be a soloist. And if we can't do that, we can't make it as a musician. That's the thought. And you could not be so far wrong at all. There are string players on tour with bands all over the world. I mean, I have friends that I played with at Disney and I played with in the Henry Mancini Institute. They go on tour with these rock bands and pop groups and they go on tour all over the place and they love it. They love living that life. I know people that come in and they're freelance, and every time a show comes through town, maybe it's Hamilton, maybe it's Anything Goes, whatever show it is, they're the folks that are the first call to do that. Or they're in the opera orchestras, or they're playing all the time. They're just not principal violin of the Atlanta Symphony. right? But there's a career to be made there. I know so many people that are like, well, I want to be a composer, but I'm likely not going to be writing for the Atlanta Symphony. I'm not going to be writing for the Baltimore Symphony. Well, guess what? I write for them a little bit, right? I've written for the Baltimore Symphony, and I've had the Miami Symphony play a lot of some of my music. But I mean, a lot of these big orchestras, I have not had. Like Atlanta has not played my music, but I don't think of myself as a failed composer. I think that I have found my avenue. I found a place where I really do well. And that is writing for small chamber groups for professional players like the Marine Band and the Army Band. I also write for a lot of youth regional orchestras. And then, of course, a lot of my music is played in schools, and that's where a lot of you would know me there as well. Another thing composers have been celebrating is video games, right? For a while, composing was one of the fastest growing career paths in music because every game that was on the app stores needed music. And so suddenly all these composers were getting tapped to write music. Well, what did you need to have for your skill set to be able to do that? You had to be able to use your computer to record your music. You had to be able to do a recording. And, oh, hey, look, I have that background. So you see how this all rolls together, right? There's a whole network of things. And I think it's important to realize, number one, that there are many career paths in music you can have. You don't have to focus on a single one right away. And I think you just have to be open to the world of possibility. And for a lot of you, you might not go into music, and that's okay, but you can still support it. You can still love it. You can still be involved in it, even if you're not involved in it as a degree or career path. And so that's kind of how I got started. To get to where I am now, the super quick version, I was writing for all these groups in colleges, right? And then all of my friends were leaving and going to teach, right? Some of them were teaching high school and college and middle school. And all of them started calling me and saying, hey, I really love the stuff that we played of yours in college. Do you want to try writing for my high school group? Or do you want to try writing for my middle school group? I was like, sure, I'll try. And so I started writing for different groups. And then they would say, hey, why don't you come in and work with the kids? And so, okay. And they weren't always success stories, right? I went in and worked with my wife's group one day. She had an after school band in Miramar, Florida. I said, all right, everybody, let's play this first year group. Let's play a concert B flat. And she was like, and I was like, what do you mean? She's like, B flat, C, E flat, and I had to go through it. I was like, oh, okay. And after that session was over, she said to me, she goes, so I've convinced of two things. Number one, she goes, your band or orchestra, whatever you had, would be one of the best sounding bands or orchestras at that level anywhere in the world. And it's like, well, thank you. And she goes, and by the end of their first year, they would only be able to play 3 notes. It's like, oh, okay. Right. So I learned a lot about pacing and things. But what happened was people started having me out. And then somebody would say, oh, I heard you had Brian Balmages out. How did that go? And they're like, oh, it was awesome. You should have him out. Okay. And then somebody else had me out. And then that grew and somebody else had me out. And then Midwest, which a lot of you know about the Midwest Clinic. There was a year that I had 5 pieces performed in 1 year. And it wasn't those pieces in particular that took off. But what happened was people started saying, wow, every time I go to a concert, Brian Balmages is on it. And these incredible groups are playing his music. Maybe I should be playing his music. And I think that's when things really started to take off for me. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell, right? That's not a nutshell. That's like a huge container. But anyway, there's a little bit of information for you on how I got going and got started.
Cool, that's awesome. Thank you. So we're going to jump right in with some students. We already have a bunch of questions rolling in. So we're going to go to, and students, as you guys ask your questions, if you don't mind, say your full name, what school you go to, and then ask your question. And then leave yourself unmuted in case Mr. Balmages asks a follow-up question. So Tyler, take it away. Or sorry, Ryan Alford.
Hi, Mr. Balmages.
Hi.
My name's Ryan, and my question is, when you get an idea for a piece of music, like what do you start? What's your sort of process for writing something out? I'm an aspiring composer myself, and I feel like that kind of information would be kind of valuable.
Absolutely. I usually start off by finding the nearest brick wall and I just run into it over and over again. I find that very helpful. No. The one thing that I think we have to understand, and number one, is that everybody has a different process, and that's okay. I'm going to tell you mine. But I want to make sure that we understand everybody has a different process, and what works for me may not work for you. It may work awesome for you, right? And this goes for all of you. So when I first started writing, I started actually at the piano is how I started. Like when I was in elementary school, I would just make up stuff at the piano. In middle school and high school, I would make up stuff in the piano. I didn't actually write notation down until my senior year in high school. And so I play by ear, meaning that if I hear something, I can play it back, provided that I can remember it. So I don't have total recall, but if I can remember the music, I can play it back. And so what I would do is I would make up pieces, right? And then when I finally had the piece finished on the piano, I would record it. I would record myself playing that piece. And then if I ever forgot it, I would just find the recording, play it back to myself. Perfect pitch. I play by ear. Fine. I've got it back again. Of course, then I realized that doesn't allow anybody else ever to play my music, right? Because it's only in my head. And so I started writing at the computer. All right. People always ask me, what's the best what's the best software? Is it Finale? Is it Dorico? It's Sibelius? Is it No Flight? The best, are you ready? Write this all down. The best software, without question, without any argument at all, is the one that you know how to use. That's it. Okay. There is no best software. I mean, some people find things that work differently and all, but that's fine. So I was writing using Finale. That's what I learned. That's what my father had done. My father was a beta tester for Finale. And so that's how I got started. Then it got to a point where I started to realize not every piece wants to be written directly into Finale. Sometimes I would get lost, and a lot of you that write straight into the computer probably find this. I would get lost in the orchestration. Sometimes I would spend 40 minutes on a section of music and then say, okay, I'm ready to move on. That's fully orchestrated. I'm going to move on to the next section, not realizing that fully orchestrating all that 40 minutes was only like 8 seconds of music. And so I would spend in my mind 40 minutes, and I'm like, well, 40 minutes on that section is way enough to go on. Now we can move. And so I wound up with music that just it wasn't really logically flowing. And so that's when I realized not every piece wants to be written at the computer. So some pieces, yeah, they come to me and I go right into the computer. Jungle Dance was an example of that. Some of you band folks would know that piece. Another great example of that would be 30,000 and Forever. That's a piece that I actually started writing directly into my computer on a plane. Ironically, at 30,000 feet. And so some pieces just tell me that's how they want to go. Other pieces really want to be realized at the piano. There was a piece, Dr. Starnes knows about this, but there's a piece that I wrote called Love and Light, which was premiered by the Army Band this year, feels like last year. And that piece, I actually tried to start on the computer and it didn't work. It wasn't working at all. And I realized that's because it wanted to be written at the piano. And so I would just sit down at the piano, pencil, in my manuscript paper, and just sit there for hours and play. And figure things out. And then the third way, which is probably the way that I enjoy the most, is literally sitting at my kitchen table with manuscript paper and a pencil. And that's it. For me, there is an incredible intimacy that is gained from being able to hold my notation instrument in my hand, being able to touch the stuff that I am working on, right? Being able to just feel the texture of the paper and being able to do anything I want to, whether it's erase something, cross something out, draw an arrow. There's nothing on pencil and paper that I have to read a manual to figure out how to do. And pencil and paper never crashes. You never get distracted on Facebook notifications with pencil and paper, right? And so I started to realize that every piece was different. Liken it to the way you warm up, right? You all know that there are certain days that you wake up and you play a couple notes on your instrument and you immediately know, man, today's going to be a great day. If I have an audition today, I'm getting in. Whatever I need to play today, I'm good to go. And then there are other days you pick up your instrument and you play for a little bit and you ask yourselves, do I even play this instrument? Do I even know how to do this? And you might have to spend an hour, right? And you vary your warm up. composing is no different. You vary your approach based on what the piece is trying to tell you and based upon how you feel. And sometimes I will vary my approach multiple times within a piece. Sometimes I will be stuck on a portion of the piece, but I know how it wants to end. So I'll jump to the end and I'll write the end, because sometimes it's so much easier to get somewhere when you know where you're going. And then you can set the GPS and say, go there, and you can figure out the right route to go versus just getting in the car and just driving. So that's a little bit of insight into how I approach things.
It's really interesting. It's funny. We've had.
I think so. I think it's brilliant.
I think so too. We've had a couple of composers on here, and everybody gives just different answers with it. Because like Eric Wicker was talking about his golden brick, and he built his whole.
Oh yeah, he's always looking for that, and then everything develops out of that.
Yeah. So
I hate his stupid golden brick.
I will not tell him he said that.
Oh, you can tell him. I'll tell him. Yeah. We've been on Zoom sessions all summer. Yeah.
All right. Jumping on along a similar vein to Mr. Tyler.
Hello, I'm Tyler Clement from the Hillgrove Mastery Orchestra, and my question is, where do you draw inspiration from when you're composing?
I draw it from anywhere and everywhere, and I think this is really important. I think we have to be open for the fact that inspiration can be anywhere and sometimes nowhere. And there are times when I am just searching for anything and nothing's coming. And those are terrifying times, and they're scary times. I will find inspiration in books, in pictures, in art, in people, in history, in events in society, in social change, in social justice. I will find inspiration in history, in geography. And so I really look for it everywhere. And a great story would be this pandemic, right? I had just finished a piece in March, about a week after the pandemic had hit. And in my mind, in a lot of our minds, it was like, okay, it's going to be a really rough 2 weeks, but then we'll get back into it and we'll get going again. And so for me, I was still able to function. Once those 2 weeks were over, I stopped being able to function. And it's important to acknowledge that, right? A lot of you will go online and see me on social media and be like, wow, he just keeps going and going and going. No, not at all. And that's the downside of social media. We think that everybody around us is living the perfect life. Why can't we do that, right? Not at all. And so I crashed and burned for about 2 months. Didn't write a note. I tried so hard and nothing was coming to me. And it was terrifying when your career, the way you support your family, the way you support yourself emotionally is as an artist, and you can't create art. You can't create art with a pencil, and you can't create art from the podium. It's completely stripped from you. And it took me a while, but a group in Texas had commissioned me to write a piece for Midwest, which we didn't know if it was going to happen or not. It finally dawned on me that the only way I was going to write something was to write a piece about how much I hate COVID, like how much I hate everything about it. And the piece is called Unknown. And the whole piece is just a big, pick your derogatory comment that you want to use and then follow the word COVID after it. But we'll keep this a family show. And so the whole piece was about this concept of just, I hate you, right? And you've taken so much from me, and I'm going to show you how I feel, and you're not going to like it. Right. But that was an inspiration for me. And that was a breaking point that got me through a lot of that. The other thing that really got me through was this this creative repertoire initiative that I was, Eric Whitaker is a member of that. You guys will recognize some of the people, Drew, the teachers all know this. But yeah, Eric Whitaker's on there, Pete Meekin from, Canada, Frank DeKelly, Julie Giroux, Jennifer Jolly, just tons of great people. But we would meet once or twice a week for a month, and that became like a therapy group for me, really did. And that helped me. That became a moment of inspiration. And then just searching for different things. Like I had to write a piece for Boston University that was commissioned years ago, but it's to celebrate 100 years of bands at Boston University, and their whole band program is shut down. And they're like, we have to write a celebration piece. And so I'm trying to seek inspiration from that. And I'm looking at the internet, and I'm looking at people who are still making music, right? The Dear Evan Hansen videos, the cast coming together, the Hamilton cast. And it was like, people are still making music. They are still finding a way. And I was looking at everybody like you and like me who was getting on the internet every day. And we were seeking out videos of artists doing what they do from their own spaces. And it was making us motivated and getting us to the next day and making things feel like, yes, we can do this. And that became motivation for me. It's like, you know what? We are going to celebrate their 100 years anniversary and do that, right? And then I just finished another piece that I was trying to figure out what that was going to be about for a group in Pennsylvania. And the whole piece became that subject. It's called And the Music Played On. And it was all about how, despite everything going on, the music never stopped, and we wouldn't let it stop. We all were emotionally injured and wounded by it, but we all got back up and we kept the music going, and the music refused to go away. And so that's a little bit of an example of where this inspiration comes from, right? And some of this is really heavy stuff, right? Some of these things are things you can all draw on right now, right? The emotional, I mean, we're all feeling the same emotions right now. But the older you get, the more experience you get, and the more ways you find that inspiration is willing to touch you. And it's really cool.
So do you ever write a piece not based on an inspiration? Or like an ephemeral inspiration like that? Do you ever just find, oh, this rhythm sounds really cool, let me write a piece about it? Or do you always have an idea before you start?
So that's a tricky question, because sometimes I do, like I have a piece I wrote for Boston Brass. It's called Music for Five Brass, right? So it's not called like, War of the Nation and the apes took over the whatever, but it's still very inspired music. And so the first movement just became the first movement became rhythm. That was the name of the movement, and it was all rhythmic based, right? But it was inspired by this idea of just constantly developing rhythms. The second movement was called prayer. The third movement was called dance. And so there were still moments of inspiration. And sometimes it just might be, you know what, this piece is just going to be about pure energy and nothing more. Reverberations is a great example. That's a piece I wrote for UGA. And that's a piece that literally was just about sound reverberating. There was no particular programmatic element to it, but it was all about ricochets of sound. And so the roughest time that I ever have is when I'm writing a piece with literally no direction at all. I don't know if it's going to be about energy or if it's whatever. And those are the pieces that I'm spinning my wheels. I'm just in a mud bank spinning my wheels. And it's not until after I have a concept of what I want the piece to be about, not programmatic, but what is this piece? Why am I writing this piece? I can't just write a piece of music to say, hey, I wrote a piece of music because I wanted to write a piece of music. That's the perfect way to fail. That's the perfect way to not put yourself on the map at all, to not be original. Right? Look at your favorite artists, your favorite singers, your favorite bands. They have something to say. Every song has something to say. And even if it's just pure, rock and head banging stuff, they're still saying something. Right? The worst art that we have is art that says nothing. And so by that definition, everything has to have something to latch onto.
Awesome. Really appreciate that. Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Voss from the Hillgrove Mastery Orchestra, and my question is, what is the most challenging aspect of composing music?
Composing music, it's hard, okay? And here's the challenging part of it. If you are fortunate, like I am, to do it professionally in any capacity, then every time you begin writing a piece, you have a group that has commissioned you. They're paying you money. And they're saying, we want you to write a piece. And here's what's hard about it. They say to you, I love everything you've written. You know, everything you have ever written has been incredible, and I can't wait to hear what you're going to write for us. And then you stare at a blank piece of paper and you think, somebody's paying me to inspire them on this piece of paper, right? And they say, we know you will. They don't even say, I hope you will. They say, oh, I know it's going to be amazing. And so there's a pressure there of delivering, of providing them with something that is going to be moving to them. You know, the piece Love and Light that I wrote, that was a piece written for someone in the Army who had lost her unborn child. And she said to me, I want to put this in your hands. Next year, I'm writing a piece about somebody who has just survived stage 4 colon cancer. And they're putting that in my hands. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying because you become this master manipulator. People are hiring me and asking me to manipulate their emotions through sound and to tell their story through sound. That's pressure, right? That's pressure. And invariably, writing music is very lonely. It's very isolating. And it can be very depressing until you get to the other side of the rainbow. And when you get to that other side, all of it's worth it. It's like being an Olympic athlete, right? They beat themselves up. They quarantine themselves from going out to big parties and stuff because they're eating healthy. They get up at obscenely early hours. They push their body to limits that the rest of us can't fathom. And then they win a gold medal and it all becomes worth it to them. And so it's a process, right? But all those things I would identify as being some of the very difficult parts of composing for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to jump to one of our directors now, Dr. David Doak.
Hey, Maestro. Good to have you here. So first of all, I want to say I'm a big fan of a couple of your pieces. We did lyric metal at the GMEA State Conference a couple of years ago. Loved that. Students loved it. At the end, we actually did a drop D on our basses on the last note.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Some real heavy stuff. It was good. And a year ago, well, I guess a year and a half ago, we performed at the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings in Normandy, France. We did all of this very solemn music. And then the last thing we did was Forever Joyful. And it was a great, great piece. And we just really enjoyed it. My question to you as an AP theory teacher, I want to know how much theory that you've studied, and if you think that having a knowledge of music theory is a necessity or important in the composition process.
It's really hard to break the rules until you know what rules you're breaking. It's really hard. And so when I got to college, I had no music theory at all. As a matter of fact, I placed out of all of my ear training for all of college, but I almost failed my placement exam in my first semester because I kept calling things major fourths and major fifths. I didn't realize they were perfect. I didn't know any of that. And my professor, to prove a point, marked every one of them wrong. Fortunately, there were not that many of them in there. And so I got through. But I took the standard 4 years of music theory. That's what was required of me. And I took 4 years. I also took orchestration, which we all had to take. And actually, Robert W. Smith was my orchestration teacher because he taught everybody orchestration and arranging. And then as I mentioned, I took counterpoint. I loved the concept of taking theory, and it does inform my writing quite a bit, particularly my voice leading. Right. When you get into the world of theory and you talk about Bach chorale, 4-part writing and everything, we all hate it, right? And we're like, oh, stupid Bach. Why? It doesn't matter what it sounds like and blah, blah, blah. I use that in my music intuitively. I don't think about it, but I write that way all the time. And it really is striking the difference that it makes in the voice leading in my music. Now, that being said, I also break the living daylights out of it, right? I will go 30 measures in a row of parallel fifths for every note, and I will delay on it, and I will just say, take that, Bach, right? But you know, I do it all the time, all the time. And that doesn't bother me whatsoever. But I love having the background of music theory because again, then you become aware of what rules you're breaking. And when you want to, it gives you a much better opportunity to understand better voice leading, better things like that. Do I think about it from a harmonic standpoint? You know, I love when people are like, "Oh, I love how you do the Italian sixth chord and measure 39." I'm like, "Yeah, what's an Italian sixth chord? I don't remember. I don't remember any of that stuff. Italian sixth, German sixth, minor, major, blah blah blah. You know, that's all stuff that people assign to my music, but I don't think of that at all. I write what I hear, what sounds good. Julie Giroux, she's the same way. She writes what she figured, and then the music theorists figure out what to call it. But we don't think I'm going to add an Italian sixth chord here and I'm going to resolve to five. I don't think that way at all. I just write.
Yeah, we had Eric Whitaker was another one of our guests a few weeks ago, and he basically said what you were saying there at the end is he doesn't think about it, he just does it.
Right.
So I think that I personally feel like sometimes knowing too much theory can put you in a box. You know, you get caught up in all of the rules. And like you say, knowing the rules is one thing, but being able to be free and expressive is another.
Well, you know, you start riding, you ride a bike, you got training wheels on, right? And theory kind of helps with your training wheels a little bit. Then you take the training wheels off, right? Theory still helps with that. And then you start to learn to do tricks. And that's when you start doing the things that they say, don't ever do this on a bike. But then once you have the skill set, you start doing those things, right? And so it's a process.
Great analogy. Well, thanks very much.
Absolutely. I'm really on fire with analogies today, man. Jeez.
You are crushing it.
I am.
We have a perfect segue because you had talked about orchestration. So we're going to go to Marina. Marina Bayo? Marina, are you there? Or Marino, Keenan.
Keenan Marino?
Yeah, there it is.
Hi, I am Keenan Marino from Kennesaw Mountain. My question is, when writing for a big group, how do you figure out to include a lot of instruments well, especially the ones that you've never played or knew how worked?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So first of all, let me be clear. I do not play all the instruments, right? I do not. Oboe is not my thing. I've always been afraid my head would explode, so I've never tried. Same thing with bassoon, right? I'm not a double reed person. I do, as a brass player, play trumpet, and I completely understand all the brass instruments. And then I have a rough understanding of the woodwind instruments. And then with string instruments, I understand quite a bit about them, right? I mean, I do all of my own bowings now, and so I have a lot of understanding about that. You know, I still get challenged with harmonics, but I think even all string players get challenged with harmonics sometimes with how to notate things and how to do things. So I have an understanding, and even with the double reeds that I don't play at all, I still know where they sound good and where they struggle to play soft and where they struggle to play loud, and all those things. So I've learned that. But the best way to answer your question, because really what you're saying is you have all these instruments, how do you know who plays what to make the sound that you want? And the best way for me to answer that is if I were to ask you to write a sentence, any of you, and tell me how has your morning gone, right, in one sentence. Every one of you would be able to write a sentence without question how your day has gone. Now, none of you would have to think, okay, wait a minute, how am I going to have to organize all the letters to convey my thought? You don't have to do that. You're like, well, I know what I want to say, so I'm just going to put the letters in the order that they go to say that. And so for me, orchestration is very much the same way. It's like, well, I know the basic sound that I want to hear in my head. And so over a period of time, having studied orchestration, knowing the sound I want to hear in my head, I kind of know these are where the notes go to achieve that sound. And I know that it's like, wow, I really want to hear English horn here, or I really want to hear a viola sound. I don't want to hear a violin sound there. I don't want to hear a cello, or I really want to hear whatever it may be. And you learn how to use each instrument as part of your voice. And that's really the best way I've come to explain it. Any one of us could repeat a sentence and without thinking about the use of the letters. We all have the same 26 letters to use, but we can create infinite possibilities with them. But we don't think letters, and we don't even think words anymore, right? We just think phrases. We think concepts. We think topics, arguments, right? Ideals, and we organize our thoughts, not our letters. And it's very similar with the way of orchestration. The more you become comfortable, the more you realize, well, I want power. I hear the power in the horns right there. Or I don't hear the power in the horns. I hear it in the trumpets and the trombones, and I hear the horns doing something else. You start to hear those things more clearly. And that's the best way that I can explain it. The way I got there was by writing for smaller groups and then working my way up, right? For those of you that love writing, whether it's arranging or composing, write for what you know. Write for what you know. If you're a violin player and your best friend plays viola, write a duet for violin and viola. If you're in a quartet, write for quartet. If you're in a chamber orchestra, try writing for chamber orchestra. If you're in a small band, write for a small band. But writing for the groups that you're in is huge because you get to hear it. Your friends tell you what works, what doesn't work. And some of my best learning experiences come from pieces that were incredible failures. One of my first pieces that I ever wrote was for trumpet ensemble. And I wrote for trumpet ensemble, not because I wanted to be all artistic, but because somebody else had written an arrangement for trumpet ensemble. And being a trumpet player, I wanted to do better than that person because that's what we do as trumpet players. And so I wrote an original piece and it sounded amazing. I had written it at the piano. We got into the trumpet ensemble and half of it sounded like garbage. And I couldn't figure out why. And you know what I learned? Oh, trumpet ensembles do not have a sustain pedal, which is what I had been using the entire time at the piano. So nothing was ringing. Piece failed, lesson learned. I grew way more as a composer then than I did from all of my successful pieces. So there's some answers for you there.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. We have our band director at Sprayberry High School, Andy Esserwine, is going to take us to our next destination.
Mr. Balmages, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your time. I think one of the things that I really respect, and a lot of us really respect about your music, is that you write for every level of students. So a performer might play your music in 7th grade and maybe again in 12th grade and then in collegiate years. Do you find it's easier to write one or the other, or any particular difficulties writing for one versus the other? Does writing for young kids scare you, or older? How does that work when you're sitting down for the compositional process? And does a piece come out, you think I'm writing for this level, but it comes out at this level later down the road?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there are definitely some composers who are terrified of writing for very young players, and I respect that. There are also composers who have catalogs of hundreds of pieces for young players who talk about how hard it is, and they're full of baloney. They're completely full of baloney. They have 200 pieces for younger players and like 5 for high school and college, and they're like, "Oh, it's so hard to write for younger players." No, it's not. You crank them out like day and night. And then you use that as an excuse to justify why, they do it to make the directors think, "Oh my gosh, this person is suffering for me, and they're struggling for me, so I have great music." They're full of it, and I talk to them about this. For me, I have written substantially at all levels, and it makes no difference to me at all. There are some things that are harder at the younger level, and there are some things that are harder at the upper level, but I don't view them as writing for different levels. I view it as writing for different mediums, and let's explain that to all of you. All right. If I were to say to you, a string quartet has no less limitations than a full orchestra, right? A lot of you would say, no, I don't agree. Or if I said to you, hey, the Boston Brass Quintet, 5 brass players, have no more limitations than a full orchestra, I think a lot of people would say, he is officially crazy, right? You would say that. And, or what if I said the Boston Brass has 1 million more limitations? And you would say, how can they have limitations? They're a professional brass quintet, right? So let me clarify that, right? When I say that writing for the Boston Brass, let's shift the paradigm completely. And I will say writing for the Boston Brass, there is 1 million limitations, right? They're a professional brass quintet made of some of the best players in the world. And I'm telling you there's 1 million limitations. Well, what in the world? They can play anything, right? Well, When I was writing for them, I wanted to hear this beautiful harmonic string sound. Oh, but they don't have any strings. And then I really wanted this groove to be going in the percussion section. Oh, they don't have percussion. I had this great chord that I needed 7 different voices for. Oh, there's only 5. I wanted to hear wood. There's no woodwinds, right? There's a million restrictions on writing for a brass quintet, but nobody thinks that way. They just say, well, it's not restrictions. It's just you're writing for brass quintet. That's what you're writing for. But when you're writing for them, you have no restrictions at all. And my answer is exactly the same thing for a beginning orchestra. A beginning orchestra might only have a D scale, but they have that entire D scale, and I can use it in any way that I want to. I can do anything with it that I want, right? A middle school orchestra might have a D scale plus the notes on the G string or on their E string and all of those things, and great. That gives me so many different colors to work with, right? If you gave a pencil to Da Vinci, right, and said, draw something amazing, nobody's going to say, oh, he only has a pencil, he can't do that. He'll draw something amazing with a pencil. And so when I'm writing for a beginning orchestra, maybe I'm doing it with 1 color. When I'm writing for a middle school orchestra, maybe I'm using 3 or 4 colors. When I'm writing for high school, maybe I'm using 15 to 20 colors. In college, maybe I'm using 30 to 40 colors. There's inherent difficulties and non-difficulties that arrive with no matter what you're doing. When I'm writing for a younger player, the trick is to figure out, okay, I keep talking about inspiration. I've got to be able to make my inspiration happen for that level at some kind of emotional level that a younger player can harness, right? That they can latch onto. At an upper level, I've got to make sure that I'm able to engage them professionally on whatever level they are and not be too trite and not make it too easy, not easy playable, but not give them something to think about, right? And so there's difficulties all the time, but I don't think that writing for one or the other is particularly that hard. I think the hardest thing about writing for younger players is coming up with the concept. What emotion am I going to get them to latch onto, and how am I going to sound like me with fewer colors? Once I have that answer, I'm off and running.
Cool. We actually have a similar question that just came in from Mr. Maury, who's another one of our directors in the county. So Koji, if you want to go ahead and ask that.
Awesome. Hey, Mr. Balmages.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. It's good to see you. Hey, I had a question. One of the things I think and along with many directors agree with, is you write great melodies. And I think that's one of the things that I'm always, when I'm looking for a piece of music, for regardless of what level, is there a good melodic line? And I teach orchestra, and usually melodies are written for the first violins only, but you do a great job of making sure the other voices also get a melodic line. So my question is, do you start with when you're composing a new piece of music, do you start with a melodic idea and then build everything around that? Or do you just start with something more abstract, like I have a feeling of something that I want to start with, and maybe the melody gets maybe it grows out of something? What comes first?
Yeah, that song. I've got a feeling. Anyway, sorry. So it's the great question. It's the chicken or the egg question is really what this boils down to. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, the atmosphere or the melody? What is it? Every piece is different. Every piece is different. And so take a piece like a lot of the band directors would know is Jungle Dance. The melody totally came first. The whole piece is based on that melody, and the melody actually never even stops. It goes through the whole piece. But then let's rewind to a piece, 30,000 and Forever. For those of you that know it, that's a piece, orchestral piece that I wrote, again, on the way to Australia. And the whole first minute and a half of that piece, it's all textural and harmonic. There's no melody at all. And even when the melody comes in, it's still very distant. It's not just like, oh, here's the melody. And so what I always tell people is that I always strive for a balance in the musical elements in my music. All right. So some pieces, yes, the melody is extraordinarily strong and it speaks to me, and I try to develop that melody. And that's why people really latch on, because I take a melody and I develop it. That's what John Williams is amazing at, right? Taking a melody and developing it thematically through the entire score of a movie. He's brilliant at it. And so that's something that I will do. But there are other times that I am completely engrossed in the harmonic structure or in the color, and that becomes the driving factor of the piece. And so there will be pieces where the melody is not that important at all, and everything else becomes the focus. And I put so much more stock in that. And then there are other parts where it's like, hey, this is really melodically based. Forever Joyful is a great example. That's just a very melodically based piece. And I love that aspect of it, right? But it's important to realize that I'm not necessarily always striving for the melody, but I'm striving for asking the question, what is interesting about this piece? What wants to be interesting? What wants to get my attention? And let me develop that until the music wants to take me in a different direction. And so sometimes it's melody, sometimes it's rhythm, sometimes it's completely, whatever it might be. Forever Joyful started off with that bum 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 bum. That came way before the melody. That came way before. So that's an example.
Cool. Yeah. Again,
And say hi to your awesome wife for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I will. Thank you. Great answer.
I think Koji would have killed.
That's just because I said your awesome wife. That's the only reason you say that.
I disagree, but that's okay. That's okay.
We're going to flip gears for a second and go to Cleveland, who has a music business question.
Hi, Mr. Balmages. My name is Cleveland Massey. I come from Sprayberry High School. My question is more for the monetization of your work, because a lot of people, when they think about the music industry, they think about like how difficult it can be to join it, and the assumption is always that you're not going to be able to make any money, or it'll be really difficult to get into because you need a lot of skills. So my question is, how would you go about to do that, or getting the skills to be able to make sure after you get out of college, or just in general, just to be able to get a job or to have a career to begin with?
Yeah, great question. To answer it, you're probably not going to get a career. So good luck. Next question. No, I'm just kidding. So, here's the thing. Being a musician, you have to understand that being a musician can very much be similar to being a musical investor. All right. And if you think about it, when you're investing, the more you invest in different places, the more you offer the opportunity for growth. And so the more you're invested in various elements, like for example, if you're invested in 5 different areas and one of those areas crashes, all your eggs are not in that basket. So you've got other areas as a backup. And so one thing that I always say to people is, first of all, diversify. If you're a performer, that means that you cannot just play orchestral music. That means that you need to learn to play show music. You need to learn to play in a jazz idiom. You need to be able to be a string player in a rock band. You need to be able to absorb and play. If you're at a church and the music director says, I need a descant, you need to be able to have the skill set to do a little bit of improvisation over the hymn that they're doing, because that might be the very thing that gets you the next job. That might be the very thing that person says, wow, this is the first person that's been able to do this. I'm going to keep hiring them. And then next thing you know, that person's doing an orchestra concert at their church and they hire you to do that. And then the person that plays in that orchestra also plays in a community orchestra, and then they ask you to come in and do that. That's how this all starts. So the first thing I would say is make sure that you have given yourself the opportunity to be competent in a lot of different areas. And I think I'm a good example of that, right? I was playing trumpet professionally. I was playing orchestrally, but at the same time, I was doing show stuff like at Disney. I was doing jazz stuff like out in LA. At the same time, I was doing media, writing for media. I was writing for band. I was writing for orchestra. And so I was really setting myself up to have lots of different revenues of income. And I think that's really important. I would encourage all of you that want to make money in music to take a music business course. Because, I love all the, I'm not going to be in the music business. I'm going to be a music educator. So I don't need to take music business. I'm not doing that. I say, if you're ever going to do a music transaction where you perform a service of any kind and get paid for it, welcome to the music business, folks. And you want a course in it. Even if you're doing private lessons, what are the ways to protect yourself? What are the ways to set yourself up? Getting your own website up and running. Maybe some of you that are into the composition realm, you're going to get yourself up online, start joining groups like Taxi, T-A-X-I, right? They're a group that will take your music and get it into the world of film and television and radio. So I think this is the time that the entrepreneurial spirit really could shine. And so I would encourage you to look in all of those places, but first ask yourselves, what can I do? What can I do better? And where are my limitations? If somebody asks me to do something, what can I not do right now? And is there a way for me able to be competent in that? And for a lot of you, it's probably improvisation, right? Being able to improvise something. I'm not asking you to play jazz with the Gordon Goodwin Big Fat Band, but I am saying, hey, maybe you should be listening to some Bach chorales and experiment with putting an ostinato on the top, because I've had to do it a million times. I've had to do it as a trumpet player a million times, and I keep getting the gig, right? And so make yourself available in that way, and not only available to others, but available to yourself to have the courage to explore. Right now, you're in a safe place. You're in your house. Doesn't get much safer. Explore now.
Well, I've got one or maybe two just follow-up questions to that. One is, and this is just something I have no idea about. I have to imagine that you're kind of in the upper echelon of music composers right now, at least for what you do, which is writing for a lot of schools and some symphonies and that kind of thing. But what is the breakdown? Because I know for an author, for instance, they put out, and I'm not looking for specific numbers, but if they put out a $50 book, they get a certain percentage of that from the publisher. Does that work the same way for you? Because I know there's a lot of schools that are buying a piece and then they don't touch it for a couple of years and they play it again. So what does it look like on your side of things? How are
and
you
so there's lots of different ways this happens. And so in the world of publishing, where you sign with a publisher, like I run FJH. It's not my company, but I control it. And so with a standard publishing agreement, a composer will write a piece, and let's say it's $100, right? The publisher sells it for $100, and the composer gets 10% of that. And immediately you all say, "Wow, $10 and it's 100." So the publishing company gets $90. That's not fair at all, right? But then you start looking at, what does the publishing company do? Well, first of all, most of you do not buy from the publishing company. You buy from third-party vendors like Pepper or Amazon or Music and Arts or whatever it might be. And they, in order to make a living, they buy at a discount. So they might say, well, we're going to buy your $100 piece for $50 so that we can make money on it too. So then suddenly you've got the publisher who now is only getting $50 for the $100 piece, and they have to pay the composer 10 of those dollars. So now they've got $40, and they've got to pay for the shipping and the warehousing and the recording. And that takes them down to 30, 25. And so the numbers start to change pretty dramatically. Now, in this day and age, there's a lot of composers that are self-publishing, right? Eric Whittaker does a lot of his own publishing, and Hal Leonard distributes him. John Mackey does all of his own publishing. And they do that because they get a much bigger chunk. But still, Pepper is still buying 50% discount from them. And so they're still getting hit with that, and they want people to buy direct from them. Because if you buy a piece from me directly or from John directly, then instead of us getting $40 or whatever, we get the full 100, right? And then we just have to pay for our web hosting fees or whatever it might be. And so there's a lot of composers that are starting to realize, you know what, I'm okay with not selling nearly as much quantity of music, but making much more on what I am selling. In my case, I have such a large body of work that it would be impossible for me to warehouse all of that and to ship it all and to get it to people, because we're talking thousands of pieces a year. I would lose my mind. When somebody orders one piece for me, it's like, oh, geez, I got to fill a PDF today. And I'm lucky if I can. And so business, that's not my forte. And so if I ever do that, I would do a distribution deal. But that's kind of a rough breakdown of what happens. And Amazon, we all love Amazon, but Amazon buys at 65% discount. It's almost impossible for my company to survive on Amazon sales because Amazon forces you to give them such a huge discount. So yeah, I'm glad it's cheap for everybody, but the people that are selling through them, a lot of them are going to, good luck on staying in business.
Right.
But go Amazon.
All right, I appreciate that. All right, we're nearing the end, so let's do a couple kind of fun questions. So we had one from, where was it? Sorry, Kylie Kilgore. Kylie, are you there?
Did I make Kylie fall asleep?
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, my question was, have you had anything embarrassing? Oh, I'm Kaylee Kilgore from Kennesaw Mountain. Have you had anything musically embarrassing where you like messed up and then like ad-libbed and make it sound like it was supposed to happen, or like made it seem like it was written that way?
I am a professional. I never mess up. No. I've had lots of interesting things happen. As a player, yeah, I've definitely had things that have happened, right? And when you make a mistake as a player, the big thing that differentiates is that some people, when they make a mistake as a player, they allow that one mistake to result in 15 more mistakes immediately after. Versus saying, well, I have one egg that I dropped there, and then I'm not going to allow that to affect my next 10 seconds of playing. And so sometimes it's like, hey, I played this, it was loud, it was completely wrong note, but it had a good sound, and I'm going to move on. There have also been instances where groups that I've been conducting have fallen apart. And in performance where everybody gets lost. And those are moments where it's very difficult, but you rely on your instincts as a musician to very slowly start to find people, and you know where the strong players are, and you reach around and you start to find them. There was one piece where I had written that a group everybody got lost except for the mallet player, who was rolling on a B natural when it was supposed to be a B flat. But it didn't matter because everybody else got lost anyway. So all you heard was the guy rolling for a while. And then there was a fermata coming up. So I just let the roll happen for a while. And then I just cut everybody off with a fermata. And then I brought everybody back in. And the audience had no idea. Well, they should have known, but they weren't very smart. Anyway, so there's going to be those things. But I mean, you learn to be a performer. You learn to play the audience. And we're all going to make mistakes. It's the human condition. Even in orchestra, right? The orchestras get their sound because everybody is playing slightly out of tune at a slightly different rate of vibrato at a slightly different speed. And it's that imperfection that makes the orchestra sound amazing. If we didn't have that, orchestras wouldn't sound good at all. And so, yeah, mistakes are going to happen, but I never dwell on them. And I have kids that do it all the time. They're like, oh, I'm so sorry about it. And I say, look, maybe you made a mistake, but think about all the other things that went well. And maybe if you didn't make the mistake, maybe we wouldn't have had the emotional impact on the audience that we would have had otherwise, right? We don't know. And so celebrate the performance, not the mistake.
Awesome. That's great. All right. Well, believe it or not, we have spent an entire hour, and we still have some more questions, but I think that means we'll just have to have you back out at some point. So we'll for sure be in touch. Brian, if you don't mind, stick around for the very end, but if you have any final words that you want to say to the students, and then we'll close it out.
Yeah. Hey, so let's get real for a second. One thing that I always like to tell everybody is that, as I mentioned in the beginning of this, we all have good days and we all have bad days, and it's important to acknowledge. It is important to acknowledge. It is important to acknowledge that there are days that I'm in tears because all I want to do is get on a podium and there are days that I'm frustrated because I'm writing commission after commission, having no idea when they're going to be formed, right? There's that element of things. However, one thing that gets me through that I think will get you through, hopefully, is a couple thoughts. Number one, we all talk about how we're in a time of uncertainty right now. Absolutely true. But there is one thing we know with 100% certainty. No matter what, we know with 100% certainty that this pandemic will end. It will 100% guaranteed be over. And you have to remind yourself of that every day. You have to remind yourself of that every single day. The other thing that I want you to think about is going into this pandemic, I think all of us were guilty to some extent of taking certain things for granted, taking certain elements for granted, certain concepts, whatever it might be. And this pandemic has really given us the gift of time and the gift to be able to recenter and stop and slow down for a minute and think, okay, who was I when this pandemic started? What parts of that person do I not like? What parts of that person do I want to improve? And who do I want to be when this pandemic is over, which it will be over? And use this time to create a more beautiful version of you. Because when this pandemic is over, people are going to be really excited to see that person. And so let's make sure that we use this as a time to recharge our batteries, to bring more beauty into the world, because certainly we know the world needs it right now. The world needs beauty more now than ever. So use this as a chance to make yourself beautiful again in whatever capacity you need to, so that when this emerges, and even while it's going on, you can show that beauty to other people in the world. And that's what I try to do in my music and when I talk to people. That's what I leave you with.
Well, Brian, thank you so much. You won't be able to hear us, but we'll give applause for you coming in. So we'll be in touch going forward. Students, you guys are off to your lunch and then to your next period. We will see you guys on Monday, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah, have a great weekend. Great to meet you all. Get out. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.